Modern medicine saves millions of lives every year. From antibiotics to chemotherapy, scientists have developed countless new ways of saving lives. However, some of the people who contributed to these medical breakthroughs were not recognized in their lifetimes. One of the largest contributors to modern medicine came from a woman who wasn't a doctor or a scientist at all. She was just sick. Today, we're going to look at the life, death, and influence of Henrietta Lacks. Loretta Pleasant was born in Virginia in 1920. Friends and family remembered that even at a young age, she loved wearing red nail polish and pleated skirts. Though her name was Loretta, she soon started going by the nickname Henny, which later changed to Henrietta. When Henrietta was only 4 years old, her mother died in childbirth. Henrietta and her siblings were sent to live with different relatives, and she ended up living with her grandfather, Tommy. They lived in a log cabin which had once been the slave quarters of an old plantation. Soon, she met a young man there named David Lacks. David and Henrietta married in 1941. She had her first child with him already, a son, who she had when she was only 14 years old. In their first years together, they had a total of 5 children. Shortly after they married, Henrietta and her family moved to Baltimore. It wasn't too long before they saved up to buy themselves a modest home. For a few years, Henrietta Lacks and her family had a comfortable, happy domestic life. Sadly, it wasn't to last. In 1951, Henrietta went to the only hospital in the area that treated black patients, Johns Hopkins. She said that she felt a knot in her stomach. Well, before long, the doctors diagnosed a malignant growth on her cervix. That meant cancer, and it was spreading fast. Soon, she was treated with the common medical techniques of the time, and the doctors took several tissue samples as part of those treatments. But then, without asking Henrietta's permission, the hospital sent some of her samples to a cancer researcher elsewhere in the hospital. What he found was remarkable. Even removed from her body, the cancer cells continued growing and reproducing. Now, most samples die within a few days, but Henrietta's sample seemed to be immortal. This was a big breakthrough, as one of the best ways to study the human body is to study the cells that we are made up of, even cancer cells. Sadly, there was little that could be done for Henrietta herself. She died in August of 1951 at the age of only 31. Her cancer had metastasized to her entire body, and she was buried in the family cemetery in Halifax, Virginia. In most such situations, that would have been the end of her story. But Henrietta's tissue samples continued growing in the lab. After she died, an extra final tissue sample was removed from her body before her funeral, and researchers at Johns Hopkins were able to use it to begin new, self-replicating tissue samples. These tissue samples made it easy for doctors to test new medicine without having a patient who was actually sick. Instead, they could infect some of the cells grown from Henrietta's tissue. This offered a fast, safe way to experiment with new techniques, some of which would be incredibly dangerous to try on a living person. In the decades since, there have been numerous medical breakthroughs that have used Henrietta's cells, including Jonas Salk's polio vaccine, cancer treatments, and many of the medicines used to combat AIDS and HIV. Henrietta's cells are an amazing tool that have helped mankind. However, doctors are never supposed to take samples of your body without your permission. Henrietta never knew what was being done to part of her body. Her family was never consulted. It was only by chance that they discovered what had happened, and that was more than 20 years after her death. The problem is not that research was done on these cells, but that Henrietta and her family were never given a choice or consulted about what was happening. Now, maybe Henrietta would have given the samples gladly, knowing that she could be helping others, but we'll never know because she was never asked. In the years since, doctors, scientists, and researchers have made new rules to prevent abuse like this from ever happening again. However, they can never go back in time and change what has already happened. So Henrietta Lacks' legacy is complicated. In one sense, her contribution to science has saved countless lives. But on the other hand, it was wrong to take those samples without her permission. It was also wrong not to tell her family what was going on. So the legacy of Henrietta Lacks is massive, both in helping us learn more about how to cure ourselves and in forcing us to make new rules so that the rights of patients today will no longer be denied.